If the Mets do lose Jacob deGrom to free agency, where else could they go for a starting pitcher? There's one name that's standing out above the rest in free agency. We're going to talk about him right now. Well, welcome back to New York Sports Wicker Media. I'm Y2K99. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch these videos. If you enjoy what you're watching, please do me a favor. Take the time to hit that thumbs up button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Tell a friend. I really want to get the word out. We're a little bit past 300 subscribers. My hope is to be at, maybe 400 by Christmas time. Why not set goals, right? Want to make this as good as it can be for you. All right, so let's talk a little New York Mets baseball and free agency. So the good news I have is that Ken Rosenthal has reported that the Atlanta Braves are highly unlikely, in quotes, to pursue Jacob deGrom. They don't want to commit to the years. They don't want to commit to the money. That makes me very happy. The last thing I ever need to see is the best Mets pitcher of my lifetime playing for my most hated rival, and I mean that. Okay, so most likely it's either going to be the Mets or the Texas Rangers unless some other team swoops in that nobody's talking about right now. But my opinion is the longer this goes, the more likely deGrom comes back to the Mets. But if he doesn't, the Mets are going to need a contingency plan because the Mets don't have a lot of pitchers signed for the rotation or the bullpen. You know, in their starting rotation now, let's think about it. You've got Max Scherzer, you've got Carlos Carrasco, you've got David Peterson, possibly Tyler McGill. You could use him in either spot. And then you've got depth guys like Joey Lucchesi, Jose Butto. It's not a very inspiring list right now. And then you have free agents like Chris Bassett, who I don't think is coming back, Taijuan Walker, who's going to receive a whole lot of interest from a lot of different teams. It's hard for me to believe Bassett and Walker are going to come back to the Mets. It's tough for me to buy that. So if the Mets lose these pitchers, who should they be going after in free agency for the starting rotation? Well, the one name that seems to be standing out and above the rest is Carlos Rodon. Most of his career he has spent with the Chicago White Sox, which I consider sort of like the New York Mets of the American League, the second team in the city, more of the working class, blue-collar kind of team. And last year he was with the San Francisco Giants. Now I'm going to talk about some of the pros and the cons of signing Carlos Rodon. So let's get right to that. The pros. Now I'm going to give you some numbers. Over the last two seasons, Rodon has an ERA of 2.67 and 422 strikeouts in 310 innings over 55 starts. That's a rate of 12.2 strikeouts per game. Very, very good. Last year's batters hit just 193 against Carlos Rodon. Now, if you focus on just 2022, Rodon had a 2.88 ERA and a 1.02 WHIP with 237 strikeouts in 178 innings. He made his second straight All-Star team. Not too bad. One of the things that I really like about him is he has really straightened out his control issues. Rodon has he'd been a little bit prone to walking batters before. Not that long ago, he was averaging 3.9 walks per 9 innings. Over the last two seasons, just 2.5 walks. That's a pitcher who has figured himself out, figured out what works for him, and he's been able to stick with it. So I like that. Another thing I like, he's good at keeping the baseball in the ballpark. He's allowed 25 home runs in 2 years. Not too bad. 12 home runs a year, not too bad for a starting pitcher. As far as his repertoire goes, he's primarily a two-pitch pitcher nowadays. He's abandoned the changeup, okay? His fastball before 2021 had been even averaging about 93.5 miles an hour, and now the last few seasons it's been averaging about 95.6. He's added that little uptick, and it's helped to make him really dominant. Also, his slider is really good. He throws in a curveball now and then, but 93% of the time he'll throw the fastball or the slider. And as a lefty, that's a pretty good combination. So those are the pros. Now I'm going to talk about some of the negatives and why I'm concerned about him. Injury history is number one. I'm going to give you this guy's injury history. In 2017, he was slowed by bursitis of the left biceps and shoulder inflammation. The shoulder needed off-season arthroscopic surgery. He had more shoulder problems in 2018. 2019, in May of 2019 specifically, he needed Tommy John surgery. That took him out for about a year and a half. And then in 2021, when he was pitching quite well, he dealt with some more shoulder fatigue, and then his velocity started to dip. The White Sox let him go. He went to San Francisco. He did great. Now, as far as innings go, 2022 was just the second time in his 8-year career that Rodon threw more than 165 innings. Okay, he threw 132 in 2021, and it's 69 in 2017, 120 in 2018. On one hand, you could look at it as he doesn't have a whole lot of wear and tear on his arm, but the injuries, that does concern me, because the Mets are not a team that is, just trying to get through the regular season. They're going to want starting pitchers they can count on for September and hopefully well into October. So that does give me pause. The other thing is the compensation that you have to give up. Carlos Rodon was one of those players who was offered a qualifying offer from his previous club and rejected it. Okay, that qualifying offer would have been 1 year, $19.65 million. So because the Mets exceeded the luxury tax threshold in 2022, they've got to give up more compensation than other teams would. Okay, so that compensation specifically, the Mets have to forfeit a second-round pick, a fifth-round pick in the 2023 draft, and give up $1 million in international bonus pool money. That limits their ability to sign international free agents. Okay, so you have to wonder, is Carlos Rodon the type of player you're willing to give that compensation up for? Personally, if they could get Trey Turner in free agency, that's a guy that I could see them doing that for. Trey Turner, to me, would be a great fit, adding that dynamic aspect at the top of the lineup, especially if Brandon Nimmo leaves. You could plug him in at second base, maybe move Jeff McNeil to right field and Starling Marte into center field. I don't like the idea too much of putting Turner in the outfield. He hasn't played center field in 6 years. To me, that doesn't make sense, but I'd love to sign Turner as a leadoff hitter and as the team's everyday second baseman. I mean, could you imagine an infield defense of Trey Turner and Francisco Lindor for the next 5 or 6 years, or however long they sign Turner? I mean, Lindor's here for the next 9 or 10 years, so my goodness, it would be something else. And the other thing with Rodon, he's seeking 5 years, maybe about $20+ million a year. To me, it's just too much to give. So if not Rodon, who would I go after? Well, I would want starting pitchers who I can sign for 2 to 3 years, even if it's a high amount of money. I don't want to be locked into a long-term deal like with Rodon. Justin Verlander might only command 2 years. That's somebody who I would go after. Nate Eovaldi, I would have been interested in him, but he rejected the qualifying offer, so you got to give up that compensation for him. There are a couple of lefties that interest me. Andrew Heaney of the Dodgers, Jose Quintana of the Cardinals, and I was not a Quintana guy, but he went to St. Louis midway through the season, really stepped beautifully into that Cardinal rotation, and started Game 1 against the Phillies, pitched very, very well in that series for St. Louis. They'll cost a lot less money. They both had very good seasons. Tyler Anderson was a guy I really wanted the Mets to sign. It didn't work out. He goes to Anaheim for 3 years and $39 million, so kudos to Anaheim as far as that goes. I'll tell you one other starting pitcher, though, that I'm very interested in. Not a lot of people are going to know this name, but it's Kodai Senga, who pitched in Japan for the last 8 years or so. He's got a high 90s fastball. He has a splitter that is just devastating. In fact, it's also called a ghost fork fastball. It looks like a forkball, which it has that late dip, but it just disappears off the table. I like his repertoire. I've seen him in video. I like what I'm watching. He's going to be 30 years old. He's got a lifetime ERA of just 2.42, a career record of 104 and 51. Last year, he was doing great. 144 innings pitched, 159 strikeouts, and a 1.44 ERA. In a free agent starting rotation, you know, this free agency class for starting pitchers isn't that great. In fact, most of the best starting pitchers in my mind that are available are Mets. So to me, I'm willing to take a shot on a wild card like Senga, and let's see what he can do. I like that he's pitched in the bright lights of Japan for a long time. He's pretty mentally tough. I think he could handle New York very, very well. So if the Mets lose all of their remaining starting pitchers, if they lose deGrom, Chris Bassett, and Taijuan Walker, I think Senga is a guy worth pursuing. Well, I want to hear what you think. What do you think about Carlos Rodon? Do you want the Mets to sign him? You know, am I making too big a deal out of this injury history, or do you want to go with this upside? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what you think. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to see you back here with more content from you know where, the Wicker Chair.